Okay, now we're gonna talk about recognizing injuries. It's very important to understand and recognize sports injury. However, it is best to leave the treatment and management of injuries to the healthcare professionals. We need to understand them. You need to be able to recognize them, but you also don't need to step out of your what they call the scope of practice. You don't need to do things that you don't know how to do, like try to put things back in place or try to move things that you don't know how to treat. The premise that most injuries can be run out is dangerous. So if somebody says, man, I hurt my knee, but I think I can just run it out, that's not a good thing. You always need to look at those because most injuries cannot just be run out and the person go back on the field to play. As this class develops, you will gain an understanding of the mechanisms and types of injuries that are common in sports. Also, and perhaps more importantly, you will learn how to manage them in a real-world setting. So we're going to teach you how to handle injuries. Okay, categories of sports based on risk of injury are typically defined as contact or collision sports, such as football, basketball, soccer. They're all now collision sports or contact sports. Limited contact impact, baseball, softball, volleyball, where you hit some but not very much. Then you have non-contact, which is like golf, track, and you could probably even throw swimming in there with that. It's a non-contact sport. Here's the thing, not all injuries are related to the amount of physical contact between participants. Even though these are non-contact, you can still have problems in golf and track with injuries. Sports injury research has grown tremendously in the past few years with the expansion of the popularity of sport. The science of epidemiology is the study of the distribution of diseases, injuries, or the other health states in human populations for the purpose of identifying and implementing measures to prevent their development and spread. So basically, that's what epidemiology is, a study of injury and diseases. But when you relate that to sports, then it becomes the study of sports injuries. Okay? Quick, think of an example of how epidemiologists' recommendations are made an everyday impact on our lives. Anybody know? Washing your hands helps keep the spread of germs down and people getting sick. Ding, 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 ding. The overall goal of all coaches, athletic trainers, and others associated with high school athletics is to minimize the risk of injury for all their athletes. Nobody wants to hurt their athletes. Number one, because they don't want you hurt or they don't want the athletes hurt. But number two, you can't win when all your people are hurt, so they don't want them hurt. Looking to pass rule changes in educational requirements, there is a significant trend of them aiding in the reduction of catastrophic injuries to athletes. Like in 1976 to 1980, research-based recommendations were implemented in football. So basically, they did research and decided, hey, here's some changes we need to make. The result of these changes brought about a tremendous reduction in the amount of fatalities and non-catastrophic injuries. Among the rule changes at this time were, number one, outlawing spearing, which was hitting with your head, and number two, implementation of equipment standards, meaning this is what requirements your equipment has to meet for somebody to wear it to play football. And three, heightened awareness, trying to make people more aware of what they're doing and how they're tackling and how they're hitting. Here's what happened. In 1976, you see this high spike, but as you see the years dwindle on, they kind of go down, spike back up 1980, but they gradually dwindle down to where 91, 92, 93, you're not having near as many quadriplegic injuries at this time due to rule changes and equipment modifications and standards. This is a good thing. Here's one thing I want to show you, okay? Classification of sports by contact, okay? Contact collision sports. Basketball, boxing, diving, field hockey, football, ice hockey, lacrosse, martial arts, rodeo, rugby, ski jumping, soccer, and wrestling. Yes, and rodeo is considered a contact collision sport because how many times have we seen somebody get stepped on by a bull or bucked off? It's a collision sport. Classification sport by contact, once again, this is limited contact sports. Baseball, cheerleading, track and field events, high jump and pole vault, gymnastics, skiing, softball, volleyball. Okay, limited contact, meaning there's not a lot, but there's a little bit. Non-contact sports, kind of like fishing right here, it's on the list. Bodybuilding, track, running events, fishing, golf, swimming, weightlifting. So there's lots of sports in this too, but the more collision there is between high and limited and non-contact, the more likely you are to get hurt. But that's, once again, that's not to say you can't get hurt doing any of these other things. It's just you have a higher likelihood of some injury happening when you're in a collision sport. The extent of the problem, researchers suggest that 3 to 11% of all high school athletes will suffer an injury at some point during their high school athletic careers. Based on a study at Muleshoe High School right now, there are 22.3% of the total athletic population suffering at least one injury. Well, that's almost a quarter of the athletes. Now, if you take that to Wiley High School, where we have roughly 500 athletes, that means that we have roughly 120 to 125 athletes suffering from injuries over a year. Okay? Now let's take a look at the different statistics for each sport and determine what is the most dangerous to the athlete. Right now, ask yourself a question. Which sport do you believe is the most dangerous and why? It's a rhetorical question, obviously, because this is a video. But just think to yourself. Tackle football. Here you go. Overall injury rate is 25.5 injuries per 100 athletes, with the highest rate of occurrence being during games. Obviously, because there's more tackling and hitting and harder hitting in games. Okay, injury rates have been suggested as high as 34% for tackle football. So that was in 1999, where a study said it could be even higher than that. Phase of the game where the injury occurs, 55% are on offense, 35.8% on defense, 9.2% on special teams. So you see the majority of injuries in football happen on the offensive side of the ball. Basketball, fairly high incident of lower leg injuries. Women athletes are at a higher risk for injury than their male counterparts in this sport. ACL injuries, we talked about that, the Q angle of women, it makes them more susceptible to ACL injuries. Baseball and softball, 12% of all participants in baseball sustain some type of injury. There's been over 88 deaths related to baseball due to a ball striking the person's chest since 1975. That's related to balls hitting in the chest and hitting at just the right time in the middle of the batter's chest or somebody's, and it hits the rhythm right in the heart and causes the heart to fluctuate and then stop. 14.4% of softball players are injured each year during competition or practice. So softball players do get hurt. A lot of what I see sometimes is people not paying attention and getting whacked by a softball, but other things can happen too. Wrestling. Not this kind of wrestling, but wrestling. A significant 27% of wrestling participants are injured each year. 50% or more of these types of injuries were classified as sprains or strains. When we talk about wrestling, we're not talking about the WWE. We're talking about high school wrestling or college wrestling. Volleyball. 14.9% of all volleyball players are injured. Knee injuries comprise about 11% of the total injuries. So knees are a problem in volleyball. Obviously, a lot of jumping and diving and that kind of thing. Soccer. Men's soccer injury rate, 20.2%. Women's soccer injury rate, 25.6%. They're pretty high. In fact, soccer is the second highest injury-rated sport behind football per capita. So if you had 100 players in each sport, first you'd have football injuries, next you would have soccer injuries, right behind football. Now let's look at the countdown of the most risky sports that are popular for participation in youth in the United States. Number 11, men's basketball. 1.5 casualties in a million. Number 10, women's swimming. 1.6 casualties in a million. Tied at number 9, men's soccer, women's field hockey. 2 casualties in a million. Number 8, men's swimming, 3.4 casualties in a million. Number 7, baseball, 4.6 casualties in a million. Number 6, men's track and field, 4.7 casualties in a million. Number 5, wrestling, 9.1 casualties in a million. Number 4, men's lacrosse, 12.7 casualties in a million. And now the top 3. You ready for this? Drum roll, please. Number 3, women's gymnastics, 13.7 casualties in a million. Number 2, football with 19 casualties in a million. And number 1, are you ready? Are you ready for this? Ice hockey, 25 casualties in a million. So hockey is the most dangerous sport. And here's the webpage if you want to see what that is. It's from the Business Insider in 2010, the most dangerous high school sports. Congratulations! We made it to the end of the notes. Dun, 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 dun. Congratulations, guys.